Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So I was thinking the other day about, compatibility between people. And not just relationships, although relationships will be something we focus on in this one. Because it's a lot more, analyzed by each one of us, right? If you walk into a convenience store and you want to make friends with the guy that owns a place and he doesn't want to be your friend, whatever. Bunch of convenience stores. You move on. When you fall in love with someone and you really want to be compatible with them, that's when you start looking at it from every single angle if you're smart. Smoking this blueberry parlor stick. Pretty cute, man. It's got a pretty good flavor. It tastes like blueberries. Now, this episode goes as follows. We talk about the matrix. We talk about multiple dimensions of existence, perhaps coalescing. I have often described reality on this show as a grid of possibilities in an infinitely dense matrix, a three-dimensional matrix. It looks like a cube. Just imagine a cube divided into infinite points. And every decision that you make, every choice that you choose, takes you to the next node in this cube. It could be a sphere, whatever, doesn't matter. And so you're choosing the next second, which is why you have to put out the energy that you want to attract to yourself. It's not that you're actually attracting things physically to you. You're guiding your path down this road to get to the next place on the road that feels more like the way that you're behaving, the way that you're feeling. Negative people go in negative directions. Positive people go in positive directions. People who have faith in themselves tend to find that there's a reason for it. People who doubt themselves, well, they just utterly attract failure to themselves. We can see the world doing this right now, can't we? But I know throughout my life, there have been people that I have met. And this particular case is very interesting. There's one woman in this world that really shook this into my mind in a blatant way because I was in my mid to late 40s. When I met this person, she's married to an amazing dude. I'm going to kind of double blind this up from other conversations. This guy is fantastic. I sat down and had a great conversation with him. He was an amazing person. He was an extremely creative person here in Los Angeles. And I mean, tippy top. Brilliant dude. The reason why I met her is because I'm dating her friend. And I don't know this woman at all. I just know that I was looking at her and I was like, wow, the way that he behaved, the way that she behaved, they were regal human beings. Top of the notch. You don't get any sense they even have the capability of thinking a destructive thought, a do-harm thought. It's just not in their nature. She's with him because he is like her. Physically, between the two of them, if I showed you his picture, her picture, they don't seem like they match at all. And yet they were joined at the hip. They live in this beautiful home. And I mean like, oh my God, not gigantic mansion, although it was probably a 2-story home. But it's in this very, I can say, manicured part of Los Angeles. The house looked like a fairy tale house. I mean, it's just so utterly gorgeous. I'm trying to think of what style it would be. It'd be like a Victorian home that was turned into like a movie prop or something. Just polished and just amazing. Inside was just as incredible. These dogs. The dogs look like dogs out of some Disney movie. I mean, it's just like everything was phenomenal. I sat down with this guy, talked with him for hours, and I really wanted to continue getting to meet him. But my relationship died off due to alcoholism. I'm not a drinker. That was this only person's method of dealing with life. I begged her to tone it down. No. So within 3 months of that ending on the side, I get this message, I believe from my ex, that the gentleman I talked to had died in a car accident here in Los Angeles. I don't know any of the details. But it's one of these situations where the Fabergé egg was broken forever. One of these super couples, one of these, like, in my opinion, just a perfect couple. It wasn't his first wife. I think it might have been her first husband, but whatever. He had already been through a journey, and he found the right person, and she found the right person. And so my heart's going out to this woman because of just the sheer loss. Just devastating, right? And so I was thinking, who is going to date this woman after this amazing man? I don't think she's dated anybody since. I mean, I just see her through like various social media. I've never seen her with another person. Don't know if it's even possible. This guy was unique. Again, I don't know her. I know him more than I know her. But I only had like 2 or 3 outings with them, but got a chance to talk to the guy. And you know how I talk to people. I get in deep, right? But there's this thing that we sometimes realize, and there's a cliche saying, she's out of your league. We say those kind of phrases. And in some cases, it's evident as to what that might mean. Someone might be from a lower class world, the kind of blue collar world I grew up in. And then you might go to a country club at some point serendipitously because of some weird proxy of invite. And then even though you might look really nice that day, in your mind, you would stand in front of this sort of mimsy kind of woman. And even if she likes you, it's like there is a huge cultural difference between how you grew up and how she grew up. You just flip the genders for whatever scenario you've got. And it's one of these things you're like, oh my God, this is wild because of where I was born and how I was brought up, the likelihood of me getting certain people to be interested in me, regardless of compatibility on the sort of technical level, there's a difference. But in this particular case of what I'm talking about, this woman doesn't have any Ivy League upbringing that I know of at all. But I would definitely say I'm definitely not in her frequency of existence. Have you had a situation in friendship where you're completely compatible with someone, but some other third wheel comes in and they're completely incompatible with perhaps the one you're mutually compatible with, or with either one of you? It's this unexplained, invisible barrier of why you can't make friends with certain people. You want to, but it's not working out. And we don't want to admit it because we have our ego involved. And because, for one, we're just confused. We just don't know that maybe this is occurring. We know that people have, different preferences and that kind of thing. But if we're to subscribe at all to this frequency of existence, and it could just be, we talk about low frequency people who think a lot slower, their mouth tends to hang open, drool tends to seep from their face, right? That might be a little bit of it. That's probably more of the outside compatibility that we can sense. But they truly, if we were to start saying, okay, there's a bunch of people like that who seem to get along with themselves, and then there's everybody who graces me with your presence, we're probably very similar as well. I mean, it's almost been utterly categorical. In fact, I don't know of anyone who's failed. Every single one of you I've had a chat with through text, been blessed to do a face-to-face chat with online, or a couple folks that I've met in real life and want to have a real strong friendship with that just came from online, came to me in real life. Unbelievable compatibility, like ridiculous levels of appreciation and instant connection. And what's really funny is my buddy who comes and visits me, he recently admitted, he said, look, man, this might sound strange. I'm like, to me? You could have been crazy. You had to listen to all my strange crap. But he said, man, I was traveling from point A to point B here in Los Angeles, going through Orange County, and I just started driving past HB. And he goes, I felt you. I felt you there, just like I felt Bob Gurr. And he said, I just got off the highway, looked up like one of the first cigar places I could find. And you need to understand what happened was I was at the cigar lounge. I got a dinner date, I guess you could say, with my buddy, and we're going to watch movies and smoke cigars. So I had to go get a cigar and then go to his house, and we watched some old 1945 gumshoe movie. It was awesome. But I sit down and I put the stick in my mouth, I cut it, and I'm lighting up, and I get a text from the guy who owns the place. He says, there's a dude here that came to see you. Or, no, he didn't say that. Sorry, he didn't. I don't know if he knew whether or not he came to see me. And he goes, there's a guy here who says he watches your show all the time. He's a fan of yours. And I'm like, oh my God, that is such a unique moment. And I just sat down with my buddy Dave, and I'm like, I can't just bail. But the timing would have been 10 to 5 minute gap between me. In fact, it had to be around 5 minutes or less, because I walk out of this lounge. I turn the corner. I have to go buy cigars. So by the time I sit down, the owner of the cigar place knows a ton of stuff about this guy. So they had to have some time. I was only gone maybe 10 minutes tops, probably not even that. Frequencies. Frequencies attract similar frequencies. It's just the common standard of the world, of the universe. It's the Roxbury brothers who, they vibrate at the bar in one horrible dance step. And whoever gets between them, they're not vibrating the same, unless it's Jim Carrey, and they get kicked out of the dance, right? So what if this was real? What if each one of us, because of our unique snowflake-like creation, we're all completely different, but we do have certain sort of structures. Our souls carry perhaps a frequency, maybe. The way the soul attaches to the body creates another frequency. The mind that thinks a particular suite of thoughts on average generates another frequency. And we know how this all works. It all comes together to make a global frequency. And then all of a sudden you meet someone. Well, now let's back up a little bit, because instead of just saying, hey, we're meeting someone and there's this instantaneous frequency thing, I want you to think about it on the scale of realities. Think of Mandela effect. Why is it that there's a gigantic group of people that have a binary decision, not three, but just it's either going to be A or B? You either think Mandela died in 93 or you think he died in 2013. And just go on down the line for all the Mandela effects that affect you. It seems that somehow a giant sort of random sample of human beings were shifted from one reality to the other, but everything else is pretty much the same. My cube matrix box concept of going through all these different infinite points, you just take a bunch of points and you shift them. And something in history reveals the shift. The point isn't the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is a symptom of the bigger thing that occurred. I can't figure out why some human beings can be shown proof that buildings do not fall down due to furniture fires after 59 minutes. They don't. Go watch a bunch of failed demolition building videos and you'll find out that even with explosives, some buildings don't even fall. Well, geez, I guess they just need to put a bunch of clearance furniture in there, set it on fire, wait 59 minutes, and the whole thing collapses absolutely perfect into its own footprint. Right? So how can I show someone that and they don't see it? Take the airplane footage, you stabilize it in your average Final Cut software, and all of a sudden, after the world stabilizes, the plane starts bouncing up and down in accordance with the helicopter because the plane has been inserted in the shot. You can show them that, and they can't see it. Like they're a fucking host in Westworld. Doesn't look like anything to me. And so you think, well, maybe they're just complete morons. I mean, their level of denial is at a level that's just really exceeding what you thought it was possible to achieve. But then I took a step back, and this is still tough for me to accept, I'll put it this way. I took a step back and I said, well, maybe, this is such a short filler stick, maybe they're just in a slightly different dimension, such that when I show them something on the screen, they're not even seeing it. I almost felt like if I ever had that opportunity again to talk to someone who was willing to look at it and not get all upset about it, to conduct a very, very specific test to get out a pointer of some sort, maybe even my finger, and go, okay, I'm going to stop a frame. What do you see right here on the screen? And make sure that what they're seeing is what I'm seeing. Do you see squibs being shot out of the side of the buildings that happen in all demolitions in this world? Do you see it? Because maybe you don't see it, and then you think I'm crazy because I'm saying I'm seeing something. We're taught through like science fiction that if you're in a different dimension of existence, you simply can't see the other person. Well, I'm sure that's the case too. But that would be almost like a full unit shift. A full unit like, Riker in the Star Trek episode where he's constantly going through different Star Trek enterprises and he's just trying to get back to the one he started from. It was a quantum frequency thing, right? All right. That's cool. Cool sci-fi. But now what if the shift is nothing more than a fraction of a single percentage? Maybe a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. It's just a tiny riff to the point where we're just not quite on the same frequency. It's almost like our picture has been glued to a piece of glass, and these two pieces of glass can see each other, but they can't coexist in the same environment because they're at different frequencies. And what if this has to do with our dimensionality of compatibility? This is why a bunch of people in society can be wooed into what we perceive to be absolute destruction, evil, and do harm. And a bunch of us think we're in the right. We think that we're helping other individuals and that that's the way to do it. Take your shirt off for somebody, you know? Mm-hmm. But this one particular woman who has, no role in my life whatsoever, it just is an example of, oh, wow. There's no class structure difference between the two of us, I can almost guarantee it. But there is a soul in that person that seems, just like your former husband, to be just pure as gold. And I'm no evil guy or anything, but geez, sometimes you meet people with the purest souls. There was the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. Sorry, this cigar is a short filler, so it's got lots of little particles coming out of my mouth, so I apologize if I keep picking at myself. But what's the story with Unforgiven? You got a cowboy who was a really evil dude in his previous life, and then he met this woman, and she calmed him down. We've heard of this 1,000 times. You probably experienced some form of this yourself. If not seeing it happen in your local circle of friends and family, it might have happened to you, or you might have done it to someone else. And he had completely calmed down. He had a little boy and a little girl, and then this kid comes out of nowhere because he wants to get this bounty. Amazingly played by everybody. But he says, I'm not like that anymore. This woman, my wife, who's passed, and the movie starts with him paying respects at a grave underneath a tree. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. He says, I'm different. I've been upgraded. I've been settled. And for the most part, even though he has to go through this journey with this kid and Morgan Freeman, he still keeps his cool. Even though he does exercise some of his previous behavior. There's a weird thing I think that we all feel sometimes where we're, because I've just, since I got here in LA, it wasn't so hard in my hometown, but when I got to LA, I didn't know anybody, I'm 18 years old. I'm like, just trying to meet people. And, getting a relationship wasn't my priority, but it happened pretty consistently. But sometimes you meet someone that is just not in your league. There is no financial barrier between the two of you. But somehow you absolutely know from the moment you meet them that you're never supposed to be with them because of this invisible thing. We don't want to admit it. We do not want to admit it. But no, and it's not like they don't really like you. There was another girl that a buddy of mine actually ended up marrying. He's married to this day with her. Had this total crush on her. I didn't, I don't know, I guess I knew her. I really got to know her after a while, but There was just this weird barrier. Can't explain it. She felt it, and I felt it. We both felt it. There's no heartbreak necessarily because nothing's capable of attaching. It's almost as if spiritually you're unable to really shake hands. Even though you might physically go through the activity, the souls don't ever really interact because you're not really on the same plane of existence. You ever wonder why a con man can con some people and can't con others? They can instantaneously con some people. In some cases, they can con some brilliant people. People who are self-made. They've slayed dragons in business realms. They've dealt with selling multi-million-dollar companies that they built from scratch. They're no dummies. And then some dude will walk up, pitching something completely stupid they have no knowledge about, and suck like $3 million out of them. And you're just like, what did you do that for? You know? Then I have two buddies. It's really funny. Two buddies. One of them is mega rich. And, well, I shouldn't say mega, but he was definitely better off than most of us. Very successful dude. I mean, super smart. Another buddy of mine who's more down to earth, does really well. And just normal wealth, normal accomplishments in life, like all of us. The guy is more like me. Anytime someone brings him an investment opportunity in the realm of technology, especially, he's wise enough to come to me and say, hey, dude, what does this look like crap to you? And sometimes I go, no, this looks pretty good. But most of the time it's been, oh yeah, it's a scam. And by the way, this scam has been played on two of my other friends. And the last round of the scam came through, and it just so happened that my buddy brought this scam to me, and my friend of mine here in town had the same thing popped on him. I tell my buddy, hey, this is not a good idea. He's my brother. He just goes, that's all I need to know. Walks away. Boom. My buddy here in town gave a guy 10 grand. He claims he got it back. I don't know if he did. Okay. My rich buddy, who's paid me very handsomely to help him out with a bunch of stuff. We are really good friends. I mean, he's a great guy. He gets this big tech thing. He is not a tech guy. He is a guy, he's like the dude in the Twilight Zone where he hated, the old man who hated all the electronics in his mansion. Part of it was Maximum Overdrive, and part of it was actually a little Christine homage in there too. But his machines eventually started attacking him. My rich buddy, he could make something break just because of his will, just because of the way he feared the machines. He didn't hate them, but he just feared them, and they just would break. It was just unbelievable. I gave him a pocket knife, and somehow you'd find a bug in it. It's really strange. Well, someone pitched in the same thing that my other buddy came and checked on me with. The wealthy guy could have just invited me to lunch for free. I would have looked at it and said, don't get into this. Instead, he's now been in this for years and years and years. He's millions of dollars into this thing. He's getting fed every freaking long play line on planet Earth. Bad decision. Well, what's the difference between these two situations, and why does this apply to this? Well, my buddy, who's like me, whatever frequency that we have, we can smell this particular scam. We can smell it really well. My other friend, perhaps, is in this utter dimension with this scam artist to the point he looks at the guy, and the guy talks to him, and he says all those lines. And for whatever reason, it hits him way harder than it hits me, because he's not some idiot. It's not just one of these situations about, oh, well, smart people con dumb people. Yeah, my buddy on the rich side was not super knowledgeable in technology at all. But business-wise, he could school me 10 ways to Sunday. So he should have smelled, especially when you start cutting checks, man, right? Now, the criticism of this concept would be, oh, you're just making up excuses why you're not compatible with other people. If I was probably 20 years younger, I would elect that as my own assertion on this theory. But as an older guy who doesn't need to be in a relationship with anybody, especially not this couple that broke up, I'm not in her league. And I'm not where she lives. It's just there's nothing there whatsoever. I'm just studying my own feelings. But I would also put forth that this was a bit of a take away her and bring back the husband. If I'd had a long-term friendship with him, there still would be this almost cosmic barrier between me being inside his world. I could visit him and talk to him, but I would never be inside his world. Sometimes when you meet really, you could say famous people, but very accomplished people who have stood on stage and performed for 20, 35 years or whatever, you can itemize in your brain why there's a difference between you and them. They set up gigantic stages. They've got millions of people they perform to a year at, 10,000, 3,000 to 10,000 interval people, groups. They're backstage. They got a mic. Maybe the stage is elaborate and has elevators and all kinds of wild stuff and pyros and LED screens. And they walk on stage and they own that experience from start to finish at a huge high energy level. They're different types of people, right? They have massaged in themselves this feedback frequency of being able to accomplish what 99.9% of the world doesn't think they're capable of doing. It's as if they're in a different dimension. Now, some of you will remember that I've talked about this overlay reality thing that happens to me. I'll be driving down the street. I'll be somewhere at some point, and I just see where I am, there's like another reality on top of it for like a few seconds. And it's just this beautiful, positive version of this reality. And I mean, it's like everything is right. Even if traffic is packed, it's like we don't care because we're all going home to do something or going to work to do something that we want to do. Tesla talked about this exact thing in his 1919 biography, which I just couldn't believe. I feel like a nutbag telling you guys that. And he talks about it in his book. I was like, this is a thing. This is a thing. There's some sort of ability to tune your eyes, to tune your soul. I don't know what it is. You're not really seeing it with your eyes. You're seeing it with your soul or your mind or your consciousness or whatever it is. It's in your mind's eye, like your imagination place, right? Good designers can see this. Why? Because they're sitting there thinking about, I need to make a stealth aircraft that's fake for this stealth movie, and I just need to think about this. Oh yeah, I see it. Sid Mead used to do that all the time. That's what he was paid to do. He has the story described to him, and he can completely see it in 3D. So he starts drawing it, pencil sketches, and he starts painting preliminaries, and he paints the final stuff. And somebody sees that and does whatever they got to do, build a model, build CG, whatever it was. The reason why I mention that is that it calls out to this capability of being sort of a multidimensional person. But what if we're blind to the actual technology or the actual reality of the situation? This is happening to us, but we don't have knowledge that it's happening to us. It would almost be as if we have invisible people around us who can, if they want to, touch us, move something. But we can't conceive of that could ever happen. But we're getting touched. We're getting prodded. We're having things whispered into our ears or into our minds like a Babel fish. We're getting the input, but we don't know what's happening. Well, what if we're stuck like the mirror in Superman 1 with Christopher Reeve? The three bad people that were banished inside that spinning loop thing, right? And then they float away in that mirror, right? Only to return for the second film. What if we're all just mirrors walking around looking at each other? We're planes of existence going, hey, how's it going? How's it going? And when you're really in the same dimension as the person that you're close with, that you're interacting with, you get this thing. And when you fall in love and they fall in love with you, what's happening on the subconscious or even subatomic level of the universe is that the reason why you're able to completely find each other and be best buds or be lovers is because they're 100% in your frequency. We keep this romantic statement that, I probably met you in another life. Either it's your buddy or your wife or your husband or whatever it is. What if that whole thing, it's not like that's not a true statement, but what if that is just that you're in a house of mirrors where you can see the other people, you can talk to them, but as soon as you try to walk towards them, you bang into a mirror, you bang into a clear window. But that euphoric moment when you turn the corner and it's the real human being. And then you can do whatever you need to do. Shake hands, hug, whatever you want to do. And it works because that's the thing that's actually occurred on the universe level, right? So the other question is, you might say, well, what about my family? Wouldn't I be in the same frequency of my family? The answer is not, but in particular. How does a life come into fruition in this particular universe? It's a very bizarre but simple thing. The egg and the sperm. The egg has one hole. The sperm wiggles its nose through that thing, and the reason why it has a really long tail is so it keeps that back door plugged. If it had a shorter tail, everybody would be having twins, quadruplets, octuplets, whatever you call them. But what is the thing that happens once these two marry each other? Once the egg surrenders to that sperm, there's the spark of life. A physical spark happens, okay? It is not just a figment of imagination. It really happens. The ethereal coupling with this cellular material takes place. There's a slowing of the ether, which turns into a plasma flash. Okay. So from that point forward, you become your own unique being, your own unique frequency. Your mother is your host for sure. She is your host, and she carries you for however long she needs to carry you to get you out. But the entire time you're in there, you are drumming to your own little tune in there. When born, you are obviously extremely in the frequency of your mother, meaning the realm of that existence. Like I've been researching in this last 12 months, you know, the Dark Five guy did a great episode on it where, again, the Nazis used bunny rabbits, and they would have the mother who had a litter, and then she would be kept on land where all these little kids were one by one, not more than one, because you couldn't track it more than one out the door. They put the other kid on the submarine. The submarine goes out to check something out. And the yes and no was a binary protocol of whether or not, after a certain period of time, they have to call in. If they want to send a, like an oh my God message, they kill the child, and the mother on land reacted electrically. She was disturbed neurologically by the death of her baby on that submarine. It was so black and white, that technology, that the Nazis did it for quite a while. Well, now I'm thinking about that. You hear that little story and you're like, oh, that's interesting. You know, it's amazing how people can tell those kind of stories and just kind of keep on going with life, right? Like it's no big deal. It's like, whoa, what? That really happens? You know, you can really do that? Again, I mentioned it a couple times recently, but the experiment where you put your foreheads together for 30 minutes, which no human beings today have the patience to do, was a big thing in the 60s and 70s. Split the two people apart. Right when they separate their forehead, put them in two RF proof rooms, meaning no radio frequencies. Show person A picture, a color, a deck, like the Ghostbuster thing where they show them a deck of cards. And the person over here, for a very short period of time, can totally see nearly 100% accuracy what the other person is seeing. Or at least they can feel it in their mind's eye. Oh, really? And then that gets confirmed, and it's like it has to be out of the lexicon of man's thought process, because if we started to understand these things, we could start pulling a lot of threads out of a lot of sweaters and maybe discover a lot of other stuff. Because there's the other assertion that would be sort of a cancellation concept, which is if someone's raised in a different era of reality, then there's all kinds of factors, right? What kind of parents you have, the way you interpret your household. And again, what's really nuts about the world is that your parental unit, either your mom or your dad, could scold you in such a way that when you're 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever, you're just mentally scarred for life. You just can't get over it because they didn't come back and hug you after that moment to cancel out the craziness that just took place. Like I was always taught, when you discipline a child, no matter what you do, you got to give them a hug and tell them that you love them after, because it cancels out the personalization of the punishment. This isn't about me disliking you. This is about you doing something that nearly took your own life, and I got to shock it out of you. Don't do that anymore. You don't run out into the street. But someone might say it's a generational gap thing. If you don't have compatibility with people from different generations, which, let's face it, 5 years, 10 years away, back in the, I'd say, 80s and before, was a big deal because things were forced to change. Today, it seems as if there's almost like a butter knife trying to keep everyone from maybe the year 2000 up all the same, right? The adults can't get older anymore. They can't. They've got to get Botoxed and plastic surgery to death. And yes, this stuff existed previously, but it was, let me just tell you, in Los Angeles, it was way more niche-y. Today, it is supposed to be just a common standard thing. Was it the housewives shows on TV? I mean, Botox is just like eating food. It's no big deal. But my counter to this is that you can have people from that same exact era with damn near the same upbringing. They could even be neighbors or they're relatives, and the relatives all raise the kids the same way, same level of discipline. In fact, some of my friends have had much more brutal upbringings and were way more compatible than the ones that had the bowl of cherries in front of them the entire time. I've been, really studying this concept of style. This thing of whether or not you have style or not seems to be embedded in your genes. And what's interesting about it is the people that seem to be, if there's two groups in this universe that one could discern, is everybody with style tends to find each other, and everybody who doesn't have style tends to find each other. One considers the entire universe a symphony of steps and dance moves. Every single thing is a melody, right? The way you walk down the street, the way that you speak, the cadence of the way you speak. When you or you typically do something artistic, because you can't stop it. If you're a writer, you're writing just beautiful sentence structures that are just grabbing the consciousness of man and pulling it through this beginning, middle, end crescendo thing. Sid Mead had style, man. My old man. I don't understand. My father has more style than most human beings on planet Earth. Now, he doesn't necessarily imbue his body with that style. That's never been his huge priority in life. But the stuff that he's attracted to, the stuff that he loves, at least the hardware stuff in this world, it's got this crazy thing. And music is one thing that he really figures out. Again, he'll find an album of the most modern music on planet Earth. And if I showed you an album of what he just sent me, and he said, this is the best damn thing since sliced bread, and a picture of my father, you'd be like, what? That dude, like that album? It doesn't match at all. But he just lives in a timeless dimension, like Sid Mead. Sid Mead was wild because instead of shopping for style, which is another talent that's very important in this world, Sid would just make it. When he first broke out of Ford Motor Company and started working for Philips, which means like Philips TVs and stereo equipment and coffee makers and stuff, this dude looked at, I think there was some sort of coffee dispenser or something he had worked on, I want to say in like the 60s, but when you see this coffee dispenser, it would have been the most sci-fi year of the 80s. Like in those really like arty homes in Hollywood. But he designed it like 20 years earlier. There's just people who can see these algorithms, and it speaks to another dimension of existence. I don't know if I would ever have the guts to claim that even though working for that guy for 20 years, that I was in the same dimension as him. Sid seemed to be in his own dimension, but he also seemed to have this sort of, this interface with all of us, such that he could just, it would be almost as if his little dimensional door, his mirror, had a little swing door in it for everyone that needed to talk to him. So he'd just swing open and just sit there, you know, and like a confession box and just talk to you. He had that capability. But when you watched him work, you definitely got the sense that, like, whoa, this dude is just his presence, the way he held a pen or a brush. He went into this recessive world where he would just get quiet and just start doing things, and you're like, oh my God. So what would be the value and what would be the lifestyle one might live day to day if one embraced this sort of theory? Well, one of the things might be just to simply say, well, as we meet people, depending on where you live, remember Jack Nicholson said in the making of The Shining, he said, a celebrity will meet more people in a single year than most people meet their entire lifetimes. It makes you a different person. For a bunch of different reasons, of course. So it depends on how intense your circle is. Perhaps small hometowns are made out of people that seem to be really close in frequency. So when someone comes from out of town, you just feel it. It feels different. Dude comes to the hamburger counter at the local diner, and you just feel him. Doesn't mean it's bad. But our instincts as human beings is to obviously shelter ourselves from the unknown, because the unknown is usually where probably the primitive man figured out that bad things can happen, you know? Well, on a daily basis, it might be to survey this feeling, if you've ever had it before. Perhaps you have someone like me, someone in your distant past. I met that woman 6 years ago that I talked about at the beginning of the episode. I've never seen her since. I'd check in on her and chat with her and make sure she's okay, that kind of thing, but I'll never see her again. But I'm using her as a litmus test because she is an extreme from my mind where this concept seems to be very evident to me that something's there. And then for all the other experiences I've had in my life, I think back and I think, okay, yeah, high school sweetheart, most definitely compatible with her. One of the girls I first met when I came out here to California, probably within the first year and a half, who I kind of had this crush on her, but nothing, nothing there. There was just nothing there. We're just friends. We're just buddies. To this day, I probably am glad that I didn't waste her time or my time in achieving some sort of relationship, because it probably would have gone nowhere. It just felt strange. Some of those relationships you've seen in your life where you're kind of like, my God, how are those two people together? It's maybe because they're on the same dimension and no one else can get it. I've had a situation once, long time ago, but I had this sort of, I can't call her my girlfriend, but we were definitely hanging out and definitely just growing closer and closer. Very analytical person. But one time we laid down. We've been together all day and we're talking. So we decided to chill out and we just laid down. And she got her face like right up next to my face. And I remember staring. She's staring in my eyes. I'm staring in her eyes. And there was this wild moment where it seemed like what was actually taking place was on a completely different level, as if our souls were looking at each other. It was a very, very specific, not just it wasn't, I wouldn't even say romance. It had to be a part of this one of the attributes of the situation. It was way deeper than that. It was like as if romance didn't matter. But it was this extreme spiritual closeness. Really wild. Can't say I've ever had that with somebody else. And I'll never see that girl again in my entire lifetime. And the people that I end up with, I mean, have you ever been in a relationship where it got really deep like that in a different way? And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And then the person you spend your entire life with, in the back of your brain, you're going, wow, there's that one thing with that one person where I got super duper close. And even though I would do anything in the world for this person I'm with, At no point will I ever achieve, probably, this super close moment I have with this person who's today kind of a stranger. How do you sense it? How do you sense whether or not this is taking place? Well, in my own sort of initial layman's approach towards this issue, it stems from some of those cliche phrases that we use, like, I feel like I've known you forever. Again, the gentleman that comes and visits me here in HB. I feel like I've known the guy forever. I feel like whatever he says is incredibly interesting, and I don't even know what he's going to say next. It's just a weird thing. Some of the women that I've dated, man, it doesn't matter if I ever see them again. They're up here in my head for the rest of my life in terms of being people that I, at that particular point, was extremely compatible with. At least in the dimension that I experienced them in, right? When I first came to California and got the job at the tax place, the TurboTax joint, my boss, Russ, I don't know what the deal was. He is just this, how do I say it? He's a chieftain, but he was also like a kind of a cool, older kind of hippie guy. Although his thing was more bluegrass, play a banjo kind of hippie. But there was something about this guy. He was infectious. And what's funny about the algorithm is I didn't choose to get the job there. He chose to get me the job there, right? He was my hiring manager. So he's the one that told the CEO, I think this guy would be great. And so it was almost as if and I don't know how old this guy was. I'd say probably 40 at least, I think. He looked very young looking, but he's using his skills at his level to find me, to sense that connection, even if obviously this theory is not in his mind whatsoever. But he was sensing this sort of social compatibility, looking into my soul probably because he was that kind of guy. To say, is this kid a hard worker? Is he lying to me? Pretty good interview he gave me. We're always talking about, picking our friends carefully. And on occasion, like, you got to purge. You got to purge who you're hanging out with because they're just bad energy. And the tough one is, if someone goes completely dark, well, it's easy to clip them. But when they are positive most of the time, but they still have this sort of acidic 30%, and you take away that 30% when you leave them, yikes, that's where, remember our cube concept, where you're picking the next second of your life. I don't like to watch negative stuff anymore. I've seen it all. I've seen every gory, horrible thing other than frazzle drip kind of stuff. I don't like to watch it anymore. I sat at my lounge and they played the Squid Game. It was fascinating on one level, but it was candy mixed with absolute Satanism. I mean, it was the worst feeling that anyone could choose to want to see, besides one of these like narco episodes on Netflix or whatever, where it's like, how many Scarfaces do we have to remake, with just different lies about individuals creating the drug industry other than the alphabet agencies that actually do it. That's why those narco shows are on Netflix, is to rebrand who's actually responsible for all that. Remember Da Vinci Code? This cat just jumped off. Da Vinci Code, they start off making it look like they were going to go after a true cabal of individuals that ran the world, and what did it end up being? A guy in an attic. It's only this one guy. It's always a lone wolf, right? It's a cliche. If you still fall for that crap, you need to keep watching the show. As I told you, we're machines. We're the best sensing machine ever. But we don't listen to what we feel. And what's kind of funny about it is, if you do get to the point where you're listening to your gut instinct, that kind of stuff, that's fantastic. But would you believe me if I would say, if there was a gigantic iceberg in the middle of the ocean, that's like a single flake on top of that iceberg. I think there's some legitimate questions about this kind of thing. Where do we get disappointed in business relationships, business dealings, the friends that we pick, the relationships that we're in? It's when we really come to an impasse of compatibility. Man, I don't know what it is with you, man. I can't communicate with you. I think I'm saying the words that need to be said for you to completely understand what I'm telling you. But somehow you don't get it. If you can insert the pause between sort of fully committing to any individual that you meet or continuing to liaison with individuals you've just simply serendipitously put in your circle, and you evaluate them and you go, all right, here's the thing. Because I did this friendship episode. No one ever watched it, but it's got some really powerful stuff in it from season 1. Go to the website. That's where season 1 is. But I talked about the difference between your friends and your acquaintances, because we constantly say that people are our friends, and it's just because it's easy. Acquaintance is kind of a big word for younger people to say. Acquaintance is someone you really just kind of hang out with every once in a while. They're incidentally there when you're with your friends. Maybe they're a good friend of your friend, but they're not your friend. Not that they can't be in a year your buddy. Your best friends, well, they're the ones that will do anything for you, rain or shine, whether it inconveniences them or not, and you're expected to do the same, right? Okay. Think about the connections you have with people, because there's another algorithm that we're going to drop on this before we exit. At any one point in time, you evaluate your compatibility with individuals. Because the one thing I've negated is time and evolution and maturation of who you are, which will change your compatibility with the person. Virtually every single one of you have a friend from your childhood, middle school, high school, whatever, college, that you were unbelievably hinged to. You were Siamese twins at one point, finished each other's sentences, hung out together, cried together, laughed together, all that stuff. But for some reason today, you're like, I don't really have that compatibility with them. I think on one level, it's pretty easy to consider, well, they're still potentially in your dimension. It's just within your dimension, there are other attributes of communication that could evolve away from each other. So it may or may not have any bearing on what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is an absolute barrier between you and another person that no matter if you spent the rest of your life with this person, millions of years with this person, unless you can develop technology to bridge this gap, some hadron collider to bring your dimensions together, you will always be incapable of the closeness that you have with those that are natively part of your dimension of existence. Those besties that are always your besties, no matter what. What is a dimension, though, right? I mean, technically speaking, it's just a mathematical way to look at reality. That's all it really is. When someone says, well, I heard there's 30 dimensions now, and then, a couple years later, 35 dimensions. All that means is some mathematician figured out another way of parsing existence into another metric. That's all it is. When you look at a Scientific American magazine, that's all that parlor trick is. It's healthy for the brain. It's a healthy exercise for man to do those exercises and to continually parse reality, because what they're doing is they're telling us about the individual attributes of potential existence that we need to think about as we consider where we are and when we are, right? But if you subscribe to this concept of being in your own frequency, your own vibrational frequency of existence, the question then arises, can that be changed? If it could be changed, it would have to go in one of two different ways. Is the frequency attached to your body and your soul? And do you have any command over that frequency? Or is it attached to the environment of which you're in, and thus could only be changed by some outer cataclysm or some other evolutionary change in frequency? We know people that have been bright, amazing human beings. They get a drink from a pharma company and they're drooling on themselves and perish without another thought because their brains were destroyed. We know friends of ours who were prodigies in school. And someone got him hooked on heroin. They didn't want to go to rehab. Miss Winehouse. You ever look at the interviews with Amy Winehouse? I think about 21 years old. There's an amazing interview with her on a British talk show. She was amazing, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely lucid, was anti-drug. Then she meets that douchebag boyfriend of hers who got her hooked on absolutely everything because, of course, she was an MK Ultra toy, whether or not she likes it or not. And they destroyed her. Completely destroyed her. So can you, within your own dimension, change sort of your available consciousness to the rest of the universe? And I think it's absolutely 100% the case. Drugs alone being a perfect example. I got a friend of mine who, when I knew him when he was young, very bright, he's still a wonderful person, but he left and he went on this, he got a job where he was touring the world. And it was an extreme, like 4 years or something of his life. And I don't know what happened to him when he was out there. I don't know what drugs he abused, but whatever he abused was at a cataclysmic level for his consciousness. When he came back, he had lost several points of consciousness. Everybody was like, what happened to so-and-so? He seems completely retarded now. He talks weird. It had to be the drugs. And what's interesting is all those stereotypical Spicoli kind of characters, that's sort of what he's like. He seems to have reconstituted a little bit of that, but he struggles. He struggles with life now. Ever since he came back from that amazing career, he didn't parlay it up into something else, right? And it was sad. It was sad that it ended because the industry that he was in is still bustling to this day, which I don't understand how he got out of it. Like if I was a roadie for bands, you know, I knew how to load up a stage, break it down, set it up or whatever, and say I was a heavy metal dude as a roadie, and then grunge comes around, well, I just moved to grunge. I don't care what music's being played by the staff, I mean by the band or whatever. I'm not going to be the guy's guitar tech or drum tech. I'm just making sure that the stage is built. This theory, just to repeat myself, is aimed at those barriers that are just immutable. You can't change them. You can't change this barrier. And the thing is from like advice from your old Uncle Mark, part of it has to do with potentially saying, okay, we used to say, well, sometimes people don't love us back. And that's just a way of saying, son, you got to move on. You just should move on. There's how many people on this planet, right? And how many of them have you met to be thinking that this is the only person for you? The tree of life, if you believe in such a thing, will always bring someone close to your sort of probably past existence, to be honest, back to you. So if you're staring at the person and there's really this invisible barrier between you, they're in their piece of glass, you're in your piece of glass, and somehow you can't get to each other. You're in the mirror house and you can't ever find each other. You can see each other. They kind of notice you and they like you. You're being in the room, but you're falling in love. It's the old analogy of having your hand in the cookie jar. The way I've said this for 20 years now is you got your hand in the cookie jar and you can't get your hand out. You got your hand on the cookie. If you just let go, pull your hand out, you can get the cookie out a different way. But what I say now is you got your hand in the cookie jar and there's a mountain of cookies right behind you, but you won't turn around to take a look. And none of them are in jars. They're just in a giant mountain. Just go over there and grab whichever one you want, whatever flavor you want, whatever size you want. We'll hook you up. So don't get all committed to something. I've said to you guys that picking business partners is one of the toughest things you could possibly do in your whole life. Because it's more intense than a marriage, believe it or not, depending on how successful your company is. I think you have more odds in your favor picking your spouse and going through the tough times with a spouse than you will being able to pick a partner and keeping in a successful company. So anytime you ever run into a company that's like 10, 20, 30 years old, and there's two old guys or two old ladies up there running the place, and you meet them and they say, yeah, we've been partners for this whole time. And you're looking around, you see a successful business. You need to understand what you are seeing is two people in the same dimension who have weathered unbelievable trials and tribulations. And the fact that they were able to get through every single challenge that they mutually shared as a business, probably individually shared as individuals, right? So stuff happens at home. And they stayed by each other's side, and the business is still functioning. That is remarkable. That is amazing. And that's why there's so many businesses out there with one person at the helm. Sam Walton, who started Walmart, one dude. Yeah, he had lots of assistants, but he was the dude in charge. The Trump organization, well, whether or not you like that guy or not, he was the guy in charge. There's a bunch of people, Martha Stewart, Oprah Winfrey, I mean, all these people, love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. Without their participation in their franchise, it doesn't work. There's not a partner sitting on the side. Sometimes there is quietly, of course. So as you evaluate your friendships, as you evaluate your potential relationships, the people in your circles, here's what's interesting about this dimensional overlay concept. If nothing else, it's a metaphor that might help you deal with letting go. You don't have to get rid of people that are not in your dimension of existence. There's that barrier. But if you learned how that little mirror house worked, right? And you realize, oh, this is actually two mirror houses put together, and the two rooms never have an opening between them. But because there's windows and mirrors, and I can see the person in the other room, and they can see me, we have this illusion that just as I struggled to find someone in my own room, and it seemed impossible in my own room, right? Trying to contact the other person, never going to happen. We're always going to be behind that prison barrier, right? So what would you do if you realized that this is the game? There's a barrier between two mirror houses, and you see someone on the other side that attracts you for some reason. Their personality, their looks, both, whatever. Are you going to sit there and keep going to that wall and falling in love with the person you're ever going to be able to see? No, not if you're smart. Oh, it doesn't mean you won't think about them, but they're not going to be in your realm ever. And honestly, this isn't anything that has to do with your fault either. It allows you to move on without, and really just look at it as a matter-of-fact situation. How many times have you ever fallen in love with someone online, even in your own head? They don't even know you exist. You saw their picture, you listened to them do a video, like, oh my gosh, that person looks so cool. And, in reality, we don't know who they are at all. And then in the end, you're like, well, they don't know I exist. And they live in like some country that's, 8,000 miles away. You don't let your heart go out. They're just in a different world. You're not going to move there. They're not going to move here. And if you're smart enough, you'll know you got nothing in terms of cultural knowledge of their world. I don't know. It's just something that occurred to me. I thought I would share the budding concept of it because I might embed it in future episodes as I mulch this in my own mind. In this very strange time that we're in, as much as there's a group of people trying to create artificial divides between us, the sort of byproduct of that exercise where people are trying to alienate us from each other, our spidey senses have increased to figure out who is sort of more like us, and it might be described in layman's terms as on our side, right? Be very careful with that kind of designation. It makes someone potentially an enemy that's not your enemy. But you're paying attention more, aren't you? Probably one of the best situations that'll ever happen is like what I had with this gentleman at the beginning of the episode, the husband that passed away. I sat down with him, and he was very creative in his life, and I was very creative in my life. Mine was more virtual software. His was creating like theme park stuff, really cool stuff, famous stuff. We were able to have a fully functional, amazing conversation. And had we had the chance to continue talking, I'm sure that we would have enjoyed each other's times like I had with Sid Mead. Okay. But he and I don't have to take it any further than that. We're talking through the glass. But if I meet another person that I need to be closer to, it's a business partner, someone in a relationship, then I need to turn that little spidey sense on that goes, are they really with me? Are they really in the same room with me? And I just want to throw this in as a kind of tangent digression, which is the other thing that I've noticed in this world is that people who will sit down and talk to me and tell me what they want in life. And of course, like I've said in several episodes back in season 1, as I was doing a lot more career management kind of episodes, your goals in life are thematic. They are about themes of what you want to do, not the individual thing exactly. That's the secondary thing. If you can align both, you're in heaven, man. If you want to help people, all right, someone goes, well, they mention some specific career. I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman. Well, the whole thing is you're helping people. That's your theme. So if you were to lose one job in one realm, you could go to any of those other jobs, and believe it or not, you'd be very happy because that's your nature, right? But I've sat across the table from people, at dinner or whatever, for hours and hours and hours, have like 4-hour conversations with people. And they will tell me what they want in life. And I listen to where they live and who's in their circle of life. And it becomes evident to me that what they want is right in front of their face, but they're blind to it. Maybe it's because it is right in front of their face. It became canceled out information. And what I think might be occurring for them, and this is sort of, again, a tangent to the overall topic, it's almost as if what they want is in another dimension. And they're unwilling to do the steps to get to it, or they don't know how to get to that other dimension of their own existence. People who want to be famous are typically these kind of people. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. I just want to go to school and get that degree, and being a millionaire is that first job's a bitch, If you do something that you love, that other people love, you will become rich. You might even become famous, right? Do you think Kurt Cobain, God bless him, you think he ever made a song because he worried about being famous? That guy hated being famous more than anyone else on planet Earth. I don't think Jimi Hendrix wanted to be famous, to be honest. Some people do, and they do it well. But there's so many greats of the universe in all different disciplines of life that simply just did what they loved and they got what they wanted. For me, that's them embracing the dimension that they're in. What do you have in front of you that you can do something with it? Do a MacGyver move with whatever you got. You got a guitar? Well, you don't have drums. Maybe you want to play drums. Well, you could trade the guitar for drums like Bobby Blotzer did, and then you become a drummer overnight. Seriously. We're all trying to get out of this rut that we might get stuck in from time to time. This one, I think, could really help a younger person or someone who's alone find the person that's super right for them. But you're going to have to listen to all your senses inside you. And you might pull out faster than normal if you can get this thing sensed. You get into someone's presence, you're like, man, I love that person. That person is amazing. But I can feel the barrier. I can feel something that's not letting them connect with me. Under different circumstances, they would have connected with you, perhaps. But the other circumstances, there's not that glass barrier. Because you would be in the same dimension if that was to work. All of you have had a successful relationship at least once in your life where it's love at first sight. It's because you turn the corner in the mirror house, the house of mirrors, and that person is standing right in front of you. You can see, just in the vibrance of their color and the sound of their voice, they're really there. and you're both alone because you've been stuck in this freaking house of mirrors, and you just hug each other, and it's like, bahoom! You can get married in hours, and you'll die together. It just happens, man. It happens with friendships as well. So anyway, give it some thought. Let me know what you think. And if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Everything is there. Just remember that season 1 is over there. It's on a different channel. Just subscribe for whatever time you need to get through those episodes. It really picks up about 26, as I've been saying. To all the Patreons and PayPal folks, thank you so much. You make it happen. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.